The skies over the Cathar homeworld were filled with the remnants of what had once been their proud cities. The alien metropolis, once a beacon of peace and enlightenment, was now shrouded in smoke and flame. Towering structures made of crystalline spires lay shattered across the landscape, broken under the relentless assault of the Drak'var, an alien race known throughout the galaxy for their ruthlessness and desire for conquest. Screams echoed through the streets as panicked civilians fled for their lives, hunted by invaders that knew neither mercy nor restraint. The Cathar were not a people of war. For generations, they had thrived on diplomacy, science, and exploration. Their society had flourished in harmony, having never imagined the need for weapons or armies. They believed knowledge and peaceful negotiation would be enough to keep them safe. But today, that belief was torn apart as the Drak'var forces swarmed over their planet, burning and enslaving everything in their path. The invaders moved with terrifying efficiency, and the Cathar, unprepared and defenseless, could do nothing but watch as their civilization crumbled. In an underground chamber beneath the capital city, the Cathar leadership gathered in desperation. The council chamber, once a place of calm discussion and enlightenment, now echoed with frantic voices. The planetary governor, a silver-skinned alien named Talaris, stood at the center, trying to keep his people focused amidst the chaos. "We have no options left," Talaris said, his voice trembling despite his effort to remain composed. "Our defenses have been breached. If we don't act now, our entire civilization will be lost." Another council member, her face marked with soot and exhaustion, pleaded, "The Galactic Council must respond to our call for aid. Surely they won't abandon us in our time of need." Talaris shook his head grimly. "We have sent out countless distress signals, but there has been no reply. The Council will not risk war with the Drak'var. We are alone." Silence fell over the room, heavy with hopelessness. And then Talaris spoke the words none of them wanted to hear. "We must activate the universal distress beacon. We must reach beyond our allies, beyond the Galactic Council. Someone, somewhere, must be willing to answer." The room grew still as the gravity of Talaris's words settled over them. Activating the beacon was a desperate act, one that would transmit their plea to the farthest reaches of the galaxy, beyond known space. It was an act of utter vulnerability, a cry for help that could invite saviors or predators. With a nod of grim determination, Talaris gestured toward the technician at the communication console. "Send the signal. May the stars have mercy on us." The technician's fingers flew across the alien console, activating the ancient beacon buried deep within their planet's core. A pulse of energy rippled through the atmosphere, carrying a message of desperation into the dark expanse of space. "This is Talaris of the Cathar," the transmission began, his voice laced with fear and urgency. "We are under attack by an overwhelming force. Our cities burn. Our people are dying. If anyone can hear this, please, help us." The signal repeated, broadcasting endlessly into the cosmos, even as the Drak'var closed in on the last pockets of resistance on the surface. Every second that passed, the chance for salvation grew thinner, but the beacon continued to pulse through the vast reaches of space, traveling farther than the Cathar could imagine. Far away, in a distant corner of the galaxy, that signal found its way to an unlikely recipient: Earth. On the other side of the galaxy, in a war room deep within the United Earth Defense Fleet's headquarters, alarms blared as the Cathar distress signal was intercepted. Fleet Admiral Cain leaned over the holographic display, his brow furrowed as the alien message repeated once more, the voice of Talaris echoing in the silent room. "We are under attack. Please, help us." Cain stood motionless for a moment, absorbing the weight of the plea. The UEDF had fought countless battles before, against pirates, rogue factions, even the occasional alien threat. But this was different. A peaceful race was being annihilated, and no one else in the galaxy seemed willing to intervene. He turned to the officers gathered around him. "What do we know about these Cathar?" Colonel Sarah Voss, the head of intelligence, pulled up a detailed report. "The Cathar are a non-aggressive civilization, advanced in science and diplomacy, but without any standing military force. They've relied on treaties and trade alliances to keep them safe." Cain's jaw clenched. "And the Drak'var?" Voss's expression darkened. "War-hardened raiders. They live for conquest, pillaging anything of value. Once they take a planet, they enslave the survivors or wipe them out. No mercy, no negotiations." The Admiral's gaze swept across the room. "And the Galactic Council? No response?" Commander Eric Hall, communications officer, shook his head. "We sent inquiries to the Council. They've made it clear they won't get involved. They're not willing to risk open conflict with the Drak'var." Cain turned back to the holographic display, the image of the Cathar homeworld flashing with red indicators of destruction. He knew what was happening. He had seen it before. Innocent lives caught in the path of war, abandoned by those who claimed to stand for peace. "We can't ignore this," Cain said, his voice low but resolute. "If we don't act, the Cathar will be wiped out." Colonel Voss frowned. "Admiral, with respect, intervening could trigger a wider conflict. The Drak'var won't back down easily. We'd be putting Earth at risk." Cain's eyes hardened. "I understand the risks. But if we stand by and do nothing, what does that say about us?" The room fell silent. They all knew the weight of the decision. Earth was still a relatively new player on the galactic stage, and many older races viewed humans with suspicion. Acting against the Drak'var could make enemies of powerful factions. But Admiral Cain also knew that humanity had a chance to define itself, right here, right now. "Prepare the fleet," Cain ordered, his tone leaving no room for argument. "We're answering that call." His officers moved swiftly, coordinating the mobilization of Earth's most advanced warships. Soldiers and pilots across the fleet were called to action, preparing for what could be the most dangerous mission of their lives. As the engines of Earth's mighty ships roared to life, the Admiral's voice echoed through the command channels. "Men and women of Earth," Cain said, addressing his forces. "The Cathar have cried out for help. No one else answered, but we will. We will show them what it means to stand up for the weak, no matter the cost." With that, the fleet launched into the void, streaking toward the distant stars, where a peaceful civilization was waiting, and where Earth's response would soon be felt. The engines of the United Earth Defense Fleet roared to life, sending a shockwave through the vastness of space as the massive warships prepared to leap into hyperspace. The fleet assembled in tight formation, dreadnoughts, carriers, cruisers, and swarms of smaller fighters, all bristling with state-of-the-art weaponry. The mission was clear: intervene and stop the annihilation of the Cathar people. The stakes, however, were unlike anything humanity had faced before. Aboard the UEDF flagship Eclipse, Admiral Marcus Cain stood on the bridge, gazing at the holographic projection of the Cathar system. Beside him, Colonel Sarah Voss adjusted the display, highlighting the areas of intense conflict on the alien homeworld. The Drak'var were pressing their attack without mercy. The timeline was dire. "ETA to the Cathar system?" Cain asked, his tone crisp with urgency. 7 hours, Admiral," replied Commander Hall from the navigation console. "We'll drop out of hyperspace just outside their orbital defense perimeter." Cain gave a sharp nod. "That gives us 7 hours to strategize. We need precision. I want a full sweep of the Drak'var fleet formation. Find their weak points." The Admiral turned to Colonel Voss, whose fingers danced over the control interface. "What are the odds they've detected our incoming fleet?" "Unlikely, sir," Voss replied, without looking up from her screen. "We're coming in fast, and our long-range stealth technology should keep us under the radar for now. But once we hit real space, all bets are off. They'll know we're there the moment we engage." Cain crossed his arms. staring intently at the display. That's exactly what we want. The Admiral's strategy was simple, yet daring. They would engage the Drak'var head-on, creating enough chaos to draw their forces away from the planet. Meanwhile, specialized ground teams would land to evacuate civilians and disrupt the Drak'var's slave operations. It was a high-risk operation, but Cain knew it was the only way to save the Cathar from total extermination. Colonel Voss studied the projection thoughtfully. "We're heavily outnumbered," she murmured, more to herself than anyone else. "They've deployed a massive fleet, bigger than anything we've seen before." "We've fought against worse odds," Cain said evenly. "It's not about numbers, it's about strategy. We'll hit them fast, hit them hard, and we won't stop until the Cathar are safe." Behind them, a low hum vibrated through the hull of the Eclipse as the ship prepared for the hyperspace jump. Cain turned toward the assembled officers on the bridge, all of them focused, their expressions tense with the knowledge of what lay ahead. The Admiral's voice cut through the tension. "This mission is not just about the Cathar. It's about who we are, what kind of people we choose to be. The Drak'var think they can destroy a peaceful civilization while the galaxy stands by, too afraid to intervene. But they've never faced humanity." A murmur of agreement rippled through the bridge. Cain's confidence was contagious, and every officer present knew the stakes. Cain's gaze swept across the room, locking eyes with each of his senior staff in turn. "We fight because it's the right thing to do, not because we're the strongest or because we seek glory, but because someone has to stand up to monsters like the Drak'var, and if we don't, no one will." The bridge went silent, save for the hum of the ship's systems. Cain let the weight of his words sink in, then gave the final order. "All ships, prepare to jump." In the massive launch bays of the Eclipse, Marines strapped into their exosuits and ran final checks on their weapons. Among them was Lieutenant Reyes, leader of Alpha Team, a unit that had seen its fair share of conflict. Reyes adjusted his helmet, his jaw clenched as the voice of Admiral Cain echoed over the intercom, reminding them all of the mission's importance. "This is bigger than any of us," Reyes said to his team as they gathered near their dropship. "The Cathar are counting on us, and we're not going to let them down. We get in, we evacuate as many civilians as we can, and we hit those Drak'var bastards where it hurts." His team nodded grimly, checking their gear one last time. There was no room for hesitation, not in a mission like this. Reyes glanced at Corporal Adams, the team's comms specialist. "How are we looking?" "Comms are good. Groundside interference might be a problem, but we'll make it work." "Damn right we will," Reyes muttered. He clapped a hand on Adams' shoulder, then turned to the rest of the team. "We've trained for this. We've fought tougher enemies. We're ready." Adams gave a small grin. "Do you think the Drak'var know what they're in for?" Reyes chuckled. "Not a chance." As the fleet prepared to jump, Cain stood once more at the helm of the Eclipse. The countdown to hyperspace was displayed on the main console, mere seconds remaining. His fingers hovered over the control panel, his mind racing through countless possible outcomes. "Jump in 3, 2, 1. The stars outside the viewport blurred into streaks of light as the fleet surged into hyperspace, hurtling toward the Cathar system. Cain felt the familiar jolt in his chest, the mix of fear and determination that always accompanied these moments before battle. There was no turning back now. Inside the fleet, thousands of men and women braced themselves for what was to come. Some whispered prayers, others sat in silence, mentally preparing for the chaos of war, and some, like Reyes and his team, simply double-checked their gear, knowing that survival would depend on every detail. On the bridge of the Eclipse, Cain's eyes remained locked on the countdown timer for re-entry into real space. "Status on the Drak'var fleet?" he asked Colonel Voss. "They're still engaged with the planetary defense grid, sir," Voss replied. "Looks like they haven't picked up on us yet." Cain gave a curt nod. Good. That gives us the element of surprise. He turned to his tactical officer, Commander Eric Hall. I want a firing solution the second we drop out of hyperspace. Target their flagships and disrupt their command structure. Aye, Admiral. The tension on the bridge was palpable, but Cain knew his crew. They were ready. This was what they trained for. This was what humanity had become. "Brace for re-entry!" Hall called out as the countdown ticked to its final moments. Then with a sudden lurch the fleet tore back into real space. The Cathar system sprawled before them, a once beautiful planet now marred by conflict. Drak'var ships hovered menacingly in orbit, firing relentlessly at the remaining Cathar defenses. Fires burned across the planet's surface, and columns of smoke rose into the atmosphere. Cain's jaw clenched. "All ships, engage!" The Eclipse fired the first shot, a powerful lance of energy that streaked across space and slammed into the nearest Drak'var cruiser. The enemy ship erupted in a brilliant explosion, sending debris scattering through the void. The battle had begun. Across the fleet, weapon systems roared to life. Human fighters surged forward, weaving between enemy vessels with deadly precision. Explosions lit up the darkness, casting flickering shadows across the chaotic battlefield. On the ground below, Reyes and his team prepared to drop into the heart of the conflict. As the bay doors opened, revealing the burning landscape of the Cathar homeworld, Reyes took a deep breath. "All right, Alpha Team," he said, gripping the side of the dropship. "Time to show these Drak'var who they're messing with." The ship plunged toward the surface, engines roaring as it dodged enemy fire. Reyes grinned beneath his helmet, adrenaline surging through his veins. This was what they had trained for, and they were ready to answer the Cathar's desperate call, with force. The dropship carrying Lieutenant Ivan Reyes and his Alpha Team plummeted through the thick atmosphere of the Cathar homeworld. Flames licked the hull as they breached the planet's defense grid, which was barely holding together after relentless Drak'var bombardments. Explosions flashed in the distance as other human dropships made their descent, some narrowly avoiding enemy fire. Reyes clutched his harness, the impact of turbulence shaking the vessel violently. "Steady, people, it's just a little turbulence," he barked, though the tightening in his gut told him this was anything but routine. "LZ's hot!" the pilot shouted over the intercom, his voice strained. "Hang on tight, we're coming in hard." The ship jerked as anti-aircraft fire erupted from below, causing alarms to blare inside the cabin. Reyes exchanged grim glances with Corporal Adams. "First one to the ground buys the drinks," Reyes quipped, trying to ease the tension. Adams grinned. "You're on." With a deafening roar, the dropship slammed into the ground, kicking up a cloud of dust and debris. The rear hatch burst open, and the team surged out into the chaos of the battlefield. Around them, the landscape was a grim spectacle, burning structures, ruined alien architecture, and fleeing civilians dodging blasts of energy. "Eyes sharp, Alpha Team," Reyes ordered, scanning their surroundings. "Our first objective is the Cathar shelter entrance. We secure it, then we evacuate the civilians." The team fanned out, moving with military precision. Reyes's heart pounded as he took in the devastation around him. The Drak'var had not come just to conquer, they had come to annihilate. Entire districts were in flames, and the once majestic spires of the Cathar city now lay in rubble. "Hostiles inbound," Adams called from the front. Reyes whirled to see a group of insectoid Drak'var warriors charging toward them, their chitinous limbs glinting in the firelight. Without hesitation, Reyes raised his rifle. "Engage!" he shouted. Gunfire erupted as Alpha Team opened fire, their weapons tearing through the Drak'var soldiers. The alien invaders moved with terrifying speed and coordination, but the humans had trained for this. Plasma rounds lit the battlefield, cutting down the Drak'var warriors in bursts of blue energy. Reyes fired in controlled bursts, dropping 2 aliens with precise headshots. Beside him, Corporal Adams launched a grenade, the explosion sending another group of Drak'var flying. Despite their superior numbers, the aliens were faltering against the relentless assault of the human marines. "Push forward!" Reyes ordered, his voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through his veins. "We need to reach that shelter!" The team advanced through the wreckage, leaping over fallen beams and maneuvering around craters left by orbital strikes. The entrance to the Cathar shelter loomed ahead. A large steel gate half buried under debris. Civilians huddled behind it, their alien eyes wide with fear as they peeked through cracks in the rubble. Reyes approached the gate, tapping his helmet's comm system. "We're here to get you out. Stay down and follow our lead." The civilians hesitated for a moment, unsure whether to trust these strange human soldiers. But when another Drak'var patrol emerged from the smoke behind them, Reyes acted without hesitation. "Cover me!" he barked, running toward the aliens. His rifle barked as he sprinted forward, bullets slicing through the advancing enemy. One Drak'var warrior lunged at him with sharp claws, but Reyes ducked and rammed the butt of his rifle into its abdomen, sending it crashing to the ground. Adams and the others provided cover fire, cutting down the rest of the patrol before they could get close. The civilians, mostly Cathar children and elders, emerged cautiously from the gate, their faces a mix of fear and gratitude. "This way!" Reyes shouted, waving them toward the extraction point. "Move fast! Stay low!" The civilians followed the Marines, moving as quickly as their exhausted bodies would allow. Reyes glanced at the sky, watching for incoming enemy fighters. The rest of the fleet was still locked in a brutal space battle above them, but the window for extraction was closing. "Bravo, team. This is Alpha. We've secured the civilians and are en route to the drop point. What's your status?" Static crackled over the comms before a voice came through, heavy with tension. "We're pinned down at the south quadrant. Drak'var reinforcements are swarming us. We're not going to make it without air support." Reyes cursed under his breath. He knew splitting up the team would weaken their chances, but leaving Bravo team to fend for themselves wasn't an option. "Adams, take the civilians to the extraction point," Reyes ordered, turning to the rest of his team. "The rest of you, with me, we're getting Bravo out." Adams hesitated, glancing between the civilians and Reyes. "You sure about this, Lieutenant?" Reyes gave him a tight smile. "They'd do the same for us." With a nod, Adams led the civilians toward the extraction point, while Reyes and the remaining Marines sprinted toward the south quadrant. Explosions rocked the ground beneath their feet, and the sky above was a storm of debris and fire. "Bravo team, hold your position," Reyes radioed as they neared the coordinates. "We're coming to you." The sound of gunfire grew louder as they approached the south quadrant. Reyes could see Bravo team hunkered down behind a collapsed wall, their weapons blazing as they fought off waves of Drak'var attackers. "Hold the line!" Reyes shouted as his team joined the fight. Plasma rounds tore through the Drak'var soldiers, and grenades detonated in bursts of flame, throwing alien bodies into the air. Together, Alpha and Bravo fought side by side, their combined firepower overwhelming the enemy. The Drak'var warriors, sensing defeat, began to retreat into the shadows, leaving the battlefield littered with their dead. "We've got them on the run!" Adams's voice crackled over the comms. "Extraction point is clear. Get your asses over here." With the enemy in full retreat, Reyes signaled to the others. "Let's move. We're not out of this yet." The Marines sprinted toward the extraction point, where the dropships waited with engines roaring. Civilians climbed aboard, assisted by human soldiers, as the ships prepared for takeoff. Reyes was the last to board, dragging a wounded Marine with him. "Go! Go! Go!" he shouted to the pilot, slamming the hatch shut behind him. The dropship lifted off, ascending through the smoke-filled sky. Reyes sank into his seat, his chest heaving as the adrenaline began to wear off. They had made it, for now. As the ship soared toward the safety of the fleet, Reyes glanced out the viewport. his jaw tightening. The Cathar homeworld lay in ruins beneath them, but the mission wasn't over yet. They had answered the call, but the real fight was still ahead. "Admiral Cain," Reyes whispered to himself, "I hope you're ready, because we're just getting started." On board the UEDF flagship Olympus, Admiral Cain stared at the tactical display, her mind racing through the rapidly changing battlefield. The Cathar civilians were being evacuated, and Reyes's team had narrowly escaped the Drak'var ambush. But something gnawed at her. The attack felt too well organized, too precise for an insectoid species driven by instinct and brute force. "Admiral, incoming transmission," her communication officer reported. "It's encrypted, origin unknown." Cain leaned forward. "Patch it through." The holographic display flickered, revealing the face of a Cathar elder. His deep-set eyes shimmered with a mix of sorrow and desperation. "Admiral Cain, I am Elder Vashik of the Cathar. Thank you for your aid, but I must warn you, the Drak'var are not the true enemy." Cain's brow furrowed. "What do you mean?" "They've razed your cities and slaughtered your people." "Yes, but they are merely pawns," Vashik explained. "Controlled by a greater power, a race we thought long extinct. The Xal'tek." The name sent a chill through the command center. The Xal'tek were a myth, a nightmare whispered about in the darkest corners of the galaxy. Ancient records spoke of them as a race of conquerors who thrived by enslaving other species, using mind control and manipulation to bend entire civilizations to their will. Cain clenched her fists. "If they're real, why now? Why attack your world through proxies?" Vashik's expression darkened. "The Cathar refused to join them. We resisted their influence long ago. Now they return, using the Drak'var as their enforcers to crush any opposition." Cain leaned back, processing the gravity of the situation. The Drak'var invasion was just a curtain hiding a far more dangerous threat, one that could destabilize the entire galaxy if left unchecked. "Do you have proof?" Cain demanded, her tone sharp. "Something concrete that we can use to rally other allies?" Vashik nodded slowly. "There is a data core hidden in our capital, buried beneath the ruins. It contains recordings, communications between the Xal'tek leaders and the Drak'var generals. If you retrieve it, the truth will be revealed." Cain exhaled. "So that's why they've been so relentless. They want to destroy the evidence before it can be found." Vashik gave a solemn nod. "Precisely, but time is running out. If the Xal'tek realize you know their secret, they will respond, swiftly and without mercy." Cain's gaze flickered to her tactical map. "Lieutenant Reyes is already on the ground. I'll send him the coordinates." The hologram flickered, and Vashik's image began to fade. "You are humanity's finest, Admiral Cain. May your people succeed where others have failed." The channel closed, and Cain immediately switched frequencies. "Reyes, change of plans. We have new intel. There's a data core buried beneath the capital ruins. You need to find it and extract it, fast." Reyes's voice crackled through the comms, distorted but steady. "Understood, Admiral. We're on it." Cain disconnected and turned to Colonel Adams, who stood nearby. "Get the fleet into defensive formation. If the Xal'tek know we're onto them, they won't waste time. We need to be ready." Adams gave a curt nod. "Aye, ma'am." Cain's gaze lingered on the flickering holographic display, showing the shattered world below. The stakes had just risen, and every second mattered. On the surface, Reyes and his team moved quickly through the ruined capital, scanning the debris for any sign of the hidden entrance. Time was their enemy now, and every moment felt heavier than the last. "Are we sure this data core even exists?" Adams asked, panting as he leaped over a crumbled wall. "We don't have a choice," Reyes replied grimly. "If there's even a chance it's down there, we need to find it." The team pressed forward, dodging through broken streets and collapsed structures. The once proud capital was now a graveyard, filled with the remnants of Cathar civilization. Suddenly, their scanners beeped. Corporal Jensen raised his hand. "Lieutenant, I've got something. Signal is faint, but it matches the coordinates Admiral Cain sent. Let's move, Reyes ordered, adrenaline kicking in as they rushed toward the signal. They descended into the wreckage of what was once a government building, carefully navigating the unstable rubble. After several tense minutes, they found a hidden entrance, an old Cathar vault covered by debris but still intact. Reyes knelt down, brushing away dirt to reveal an alien control panel. "Can you open it?" Adams asked, keeping his weapon trained on the shadows around them. Reyes nodded. "I've seen tech like this before. Give me a minute." He activated his multi-tool, working quickly to hack the ancient mechanism. The vault door groaned, then slowly slid open, revealing a dark passage leading deep underground. "This has to be it," Reyes whispered. "Everyone stay sharp." They moved cautiously through the narrow corridor, their flashlights cutting through the thick darkness. The walls were etched with Cathar symbols, reminders of a history now on the brink of being erased. At the end of the passage they found the data core, a crystalline sphere resting on an ornate pedestal. It pulsed with a faint, ethereal glow. "Jackpot," Jensen whispered, stepping forward to retrieve it. Just as Jensen reached out, a distant rumble echoed through the chamber. Reyes cursed under his breath. "We've got company! Move, now!" Jensen grabbed the data core, and the team sprinted back toward the surface. The rumbling grew louder, accompanied by the unmistakable skittering sounds of Drak'var warriors closing in. "They're sealing us in!" Adams shouted as chunks of debris began to fall from the ceiling. Reyes pushed his team forward, adrenaline surging as they raced through the crumbling corridor. "We're not dying down here! Keep moving!" They burst through the vault entrance just as it collapsed behind them, narrowly avoiding being buried alive. The ground shook violently as they emerged into the open air, greeted by the sight of Drak'var reinforcements swarming toward them. "Alpha Team, this is Olympus. We're reading heavy enemy activity in your sector." Cain's voice crackled through the comms. "What's your status?" "We've got the core," Reyes shouted, firing at the advancing Drak'var soldiers. "But we need immediate extraction, now!" A dropship roared overhead, swooping down toward the team's position. The Marines fought tooth and nail, holding off the Drak'var long enough to get the civilians and the data core aboard. "Go, go, go!" Reyes shouted, as the dropship's engines roared to life, lifting off just as the Drak'var swarmed their position. They ascended rapidly, leaving the chaos of the battlefield behind. Reyes slumped against the wall of the ship, catching his breath as they broke through the planet's atmosphere. "Mission accomplished, Admiral," he said into the comms. "We've got the core." Cain's voice came through, filled with a mixture of relief and urgency. "Good work, Lieutenant. Bring it home. We've got a storm coming, and that core might be the only way we survive it." As the dropship raced toward the safety of the fleet, Reyes allowed himself a brief moment of satisfaction. They had taken the first step, but the battle was far from over. Back aboard the Olympus, the atmosphere was tense. The data core, now connected to the ship's systems, glowed with alien energy as it decrypted vast amounts of hidden information. Admiral Cain stood with arms crossed, her eyes glued to the holographic projections swirling in front of her. "It's worse than we thought," Dr. Thorne, the ship's chief scientist, muttered, scanning the translated files. "The Xal'tek aren't just using the Drak'var as soldiers. They've infiltrated half a dozen systems, operating through proxies, destabilizing governments, and eliminating opposition." Cain clenched her jaw. And the Cathar were just the first domino. The room was silent except for the beeping of consoles. Colonel Adams, pacing nearby, stopped abruptly. "If the Xal'tek are orchestrating all of this, they won't stop with the Cathar. If they keep spreading unchecked, we're looking at galaxy-wide war." Cain's gaze darkened. "Not if we stop them first." Suddenly, Reyes's voice crackled over the comms. "Admiral, you're going to want to see this. It's not just military movements. We've found something else in the core, something big." Cain nodded. "Patch it through." The holographic display shifted, revealing fragments of ancient records, blueprints of Xal'tek technology, communication logs, and at the heart of it, a map showing secret installations across multiple star systems. "There," Reyes said, pointing to a glowing marker on the display. "That's their command nexus, ground zero for their entire operation." Cain's eyes narrowed. The Drak'var system, deep in uncharted space. Adams let out a low whistle. "That far out?" No wonder no one's detected them. Thorne's brow furrowed as she scanned the data. "It gets worse. According to this, the Xal'tek have been building something. A weapon. Some kind of planetary disruptor. If it goes online, it could wipe out entire worlds." Cain's mind raced. The Xal'tek weren't just waging war, they were preparing for genocide. If they activated the disruptor, they could destroy any planet that refused to bow to their control. "We need to hit that command nexus," Cain said, her voice steely. "If we take it down, we cut the head off the snake." Adams nodded, his expression grim. "We'll need everything we've got. That far out, we'll be on our own." Cain straightened. "Good. I'm tired of waiting for the galaxy to catch up. This ends now." The preparations for the assault began immediately. Cain called an emergency meeting with her senior officers, gathering them in the strategy room as the holographic display zoomed in on the Drak'var system. "We'll use the element of surprise," Cain explained, pointing to a debris field on the map. "Our fleet will approach under cover of these asteroid clusters. Once we're in position, we hit them fast and hard." Adams leaned over the table, studying the plan. "What about their disruptor? If it goes online mid-battle, we'll have a strike team disable it," Cain cut in. "Reyes, you'll lead the ground operation. Your objective is the disruptor control center. Get in, plant charges, and get out." Reyes gave a curt nod. "Consider it done, Admiral." Cain turned to Thorne. "Doctor, I need you to figure out how their tech works, any weaknesses we can exploit." Thorne nodded, already scanning the data with frantic precision. "I'll pull what I can, but their systems are complex. We'll need time." Cain exhaled sharply. Time was the one thing they didn't have. Within hours, the fleet was mobilized. The Olympus led the charge, accompanied by an armada of warships, each brimming with firepower and veteran crews. On board the ships, soldiers suited up, weapons were checked, and pilots ran through pre-flight drills. The tension was palpable. In the hangar bay, Reyes and his team loaded their gear into a dropship. Jensen, adjusting the straps on his combat harness, smirked. "Another day, another suicide mission." Reyes grinned. "Wouldn't have it any other way." As the engines roared to life, Reyes glanced at his team, men and women who had fought alongside him through countless battles. He knew the risks. Some of them wouldn't make it back. But failure wasn't an option. The fleet emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the Drak'var system, slipping silently through the asteroid field. The plan was simple: get close enough to the Xal'tek command nexus to launch a coordinated assault, overwhelming their defenses before they could respond. Cain stood on the bridge of the Olympus, watching as the distant silhouette of the nexus came into view, a massive station orbiting a dead star, pulsating with eerie, otherworldly energy. "This is it," Cain murmured. "All ships, prepare for battle." The first volley came without warning. Xal'tek defenses sprang to life, hurling plasma beams and missile swarms at the approaching fleet. The Olympus shuddered under the impact, but Cain stood firm. "Return fire," she barked. "Give them everything we've got." The space around the nexus erupted into chaos. Human warships weaved through enemy fire, returning salvo for salvo. Fighters swarmed between the capital ships, engaging Xal'tek drones in deadly dogfights. On the ground, Reyes's team hit the surface running. The disruptor facility loomed ahead, a fortress of jagged metal and glowing conduits. Drak'var soldiers, under Xal'tek control, poured from the structure, their insectoid forms blocking the entrance. "Push through!" Reyes shouted, his rifle spitting plasma rounds. "We've got to get inside!" The battle was fierce and unrelenting. Reyes's team fought their way through waves of enemies, taking cover behind debris as the ground shook with explosions. "Jensen, plant the charges!" Reyes ordered, firing at a Drak'var charging toward them. Jensen dashed toward the disruptor's main conduit, slapping charges onto the glowing machinery. The countdown timer began, ticking relentlessly. "Charges set!" Jensen shouted, diving behind cover just as another explosion rocked the facility. "Fall back!" Reyes ordered. "We've got 5 minutes to clear this place." The team fought their way out, dodging enemy fire as they sprinted toward the extraction point. Above them, the battle in space raged on, with the Olympus leading the charge. On the bridge of the Olympus, Cain could feel the tide turning. The Xal'tek were formidable, but humanity fought with a ferocity born of desperation, and they were winning. "Admiral, Reyes's team is clear," Adams reported. "Charges are armed." Cain nodded. "Pull the fleet back. We're done here." As the Olympus veered away from the Nexus, the disruptor exploded in a brilliant flash, tearing the station apart. The Xal'tek fleet faltered, their forces scattering in disarray. "Mission accomplished," Cain muttered. But she knew the war was far from over. As the fleet regrouped, the crew of the Olympus celebrated their hard-won victory. Cain, however, remained on the bridge, staring at the distant remnants of the Xal'tek nexus. "This is just the beginning," she whispered to herself. "We've made our move. Now it's their turn." The war with the Xal'tek was only beginning, and humanity was ready. The wreckage of the Xal'tek nexus floated silently in the cold void, its shattered remains a testament to the brutal battle that had unfolded. Among the debris, human warships glided with calculated precision, sweeping for any sign of surviving enemies. The mission was a success. The disruptor destroyed, the Xal'tek fleet scattered. But Admiral Cain knew better than to celebrate too early. On the Olympus, the bridge was alive with quiet tension. "Status report," Cain ordered, her voice calm but sharp. She stood at the center of the command deck, arms crossed, her sharp eyes scanning the holographic display. Colonel Adams reviewed the tactical readout. "Fleet casualties minimal, but we lost a few fighters in the retreat. No signs of remaining enemy vessels in the sector." "And Reyes?" Cain asked. Adams grinned. "They made it. Extraction complete. All charges detonated right on schedule." A rare, fleeting smile flickered across Cain's face. "Good. Secure the fleet and stand by for new orders." In the hangar bay of the Olympus, Reyes's dropship touched down with a hiss of hydraulics. The rear hatch opened, and a squad of weary soldiers emerged, their faces streaked with grime but filled with the satisfaction of victory. Reyes removed his helmet, letting out a long breath. His team, scarred, exhausted but alive, gathered around him. "That was too close," Jensen muttered, wiping sweat from his brow. "But damn if it didn't feel good to blow that thing sky high." Reyes chuckled. "We'll toast to it later. First, let's get debriefed." As the team disbanded, Dr. Thorne approached Reyes, a datapad clutched in her hand. "That disruptor wasn't just a weapon," she said quietly. "We found logs, schematics indicating the Xal'tek had plans for a larger device, a system-wide annihilation tool." Reyes frowned. So they weren't just planning to conquer, they were preparing for extinction. Thorne nodded grimly. "We stopped them here, but if they were building a bigger weapon elsewhere..." Reyes cursed under his breath. "Cain needs to hear about this." Back on the bridge, Cain reviewed the new intelligence with Thorne, Adams and Reyes gathered around her. The holographic map zoomed out, revealing distant systems with faint Xal'tek activity. "If this data is accurate," Thorne explained, "the Xal'tek are amassing forces in several remote sectors. Their defeat here was only a setback. they'll regroup. Cain's expression hardened. We need to hit them again before they can recover. Adams shifted uneasily. Admiral, with all due respect, we've just fought a major battle. The fleet needs time to repair and regroup. Cain's gaze didn't waver. There's no time. If we wait, they'll rebuild stronger. Reyes leaned forward. If we strike fast, we catch them off balance. But we'll need allies, someone to help us finish the job. Cain considered the suggestion. Humanity had proven itself in this battle, but they were still new players on the galactic stage. The war against the Xal'tek would require more than human firepower. It would need unity across species. We'll reach out, Cain said finally. The Cathar owe us, and there are others who've suffered under the Xal'tek. It's time we build something bigger than a fleet. Days later, the fleet remained in orbit around the liberated Cathar homeworld. On the surface, Cain and Reyes met with Cathar leaders in a vast open-air chamber overlooking the remnants of their capital city. The Cathar were a proud, resilient people, tall beings with silvery fur and piercing violet eyes, but the war had left them scarred. Rebuilding would take time. "We owe you a debt," First Speaker Allura said, her voice low and solemn. "Without your intervention, my people would have been lost." Cain inclined her head. "Your people are free, First Speaker, but the Xal'tek won't stop. If we don't finish this now, they'll return, and next time they'll bring worse." Allura's gaze darkened. "What do you propose?" "A coalition," Cain said. "A united force to hunt down the Xal'tek before they regroup. Humanity is ready to fight, but we can't do it alone." The chamber fell silent as the Cathar leaders exchanged glances. Finally, Allura nodded. "We will stand with you, Admiral. The Xal'tek destroyed our cities. Now we will bring justice to theirs." Cain smiled, though it was a cold, determined smile. "Then we fight together." As the coalition forces began to take shape, Cain returned to the Olympus. Repairs were underway, and the crew worked tirelessly, preparing for the next phase of the war. In the strategy room, Cain stood before the assembled officers, the holographic map glowing with markers of allied fleets converging across the galaxy. "This is it," Cain said. "We've shown the galaxy what humans can do. Now we show the Xal'tek that we don't just respond, we finish what we start." Adams grinned. "I like the sound of that." Cain turned to Reyes. "Your team is going back in. We've identified key Xal'tek installations, targeted strikes to cripple their war machine." Reyes gave a nod, his expression serious. "Consider it done." The officers dispersed, leaving Cain alone with the map of the stars. As she traced the distant systems where the next battles would be fought, she knew the war was far from over. But humanity and their newfound allies were ready. The final assault came without warning. Human and Cathar fleets descended upon the Xal'tek strongholds like a storm, their weapons blazing. In the heart of the battle, the Olympus led the charge, its guns tearing through enemy defenses. On the ground, Reyes and his team moved with precision, disabling key installations and clearing the way for advancing forces. The Xal'tek fought fiercely, but they were no match for the combined strength of the coalition. As the last Xal'tek outpost fell, a sense of quiet triumph spread through the Allied ranks. The war was over. In the aftermath of victory, Cain stood on the bridge of the Olympus, watching as peace returned to the galaxy. "We did it," Adams said quietly, standing beside her. Cain nodded, though her expression was thoughtful. "We won the battle," she murmured. "Now we need to win the peace." The coalition had proven that unity could overcome even the most dangerous threats. But the real challenge lay ahead. Rebuilding a galaxy scarred by war, forging new alliances, and ensuring that the horrors of the Xal'tek invasion were never repeated. On the surface of the Cathar homeworld, Cain, Reyes and Thorn stood together, watching as Cathar and human children played side by side. "This is what we fought for," Thorn said softly. Cain smiled, her gaze distant. "And this is just the beginning." The stars above sparkled with endless possibility. Humanity had answered the call, and in doing so, they had become more than warriors. They had become builders, protectors, and allies. The age of the Xal'tek was over. Now, a new era, an era of unity, was about to begin.